Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today is episode 4 of Ansible Zero to Hero series. We have already completed 3 episodes in this series. In the first episode, we learned about introduction to Ansible and getting started with Ansible. In the second episode, we learned about Ansible ad hoc commands. We learned things like passwordless authentication, how to use inventory file in Ansible, and some example Ansible ad hoc commands. In episode 3, we learned how to write our very first Ansible playbook by learning the basics of YAML, Ansible playbook structure, what are Ansible plays, modules, and tasks. In this video, we will learn Ansible roles. So there are 2 episodes dedicated for Ansible roles. This is part 1 or day 4, where we will learn about the basics of Ansible roles, where we will understand what exactly are Ansible roles, why should you use Ansible roles. We will learn about the folder structure of Ansible roles by creating a sample role. We will also compare roles with playbooks because in day 3, we learned how to write an Ansible playbook. And using the Ansible playbook, we learned how to install Apache and deploy a web application onto it. So we will compare and see how Ansible roles are different from playbooks. Then we will create a sample role. What we will do is what we have learned in day 3. We will take the same playbook and we will implement that using Ansible roles. So this video is going to be very informative, and this will be part 1 for the second episode, where we will deep dive into the Ansible roles further, and we will understand about shared roles, how to share the roles across organizations within your organization. We will learn how to write complicated roles and all. So please don't miss this video. Try to watch it till the end. Let's do a very quick recap of what we have learned in day 3. So in day 3, we learned that Ansible playbook is basically a YAML file, and within the YAML file, a DevOps engineer can put collection of plays. So a playbook is basically collection or combination of plays. So this can be play 1 and this can be play 2, where in each play, there are fields like hosts, where host says on which host in the inventory file should this Ansible play execute. Then there are fields like variables, vars. Then there is remote user, which explains using which user should this play execute on the managed nodes. Then we have tasks. So tasks are basically a collection of things that should be executed on the target servers or the managed nodes. And within each task, you provide a module. So this is what we have learned about the Ansible playbook structure in day 3. And we have also learned that once a DevOps engineer writes this Ansible playbook, it can be a single play or collection of plays. This play or playbook is fed as input to the control node where Ansible is installed. So once the DevOps engineer writes this YAML file, this YAML file is submitted to the control node using the command Ansible playbook -i, the inventory file, and then name of the Ansible playbook. Right? Once this playbook is fed as an input to the control node where Ansible is installed. So what Ansible does is it reads this place and it will understand, okay, I need to execute these tasks as part of play 1 and again set of tasks as part of play 2, where I need to execute this action, because a Ansible control node can have multiple managed nodes. You might or might not want to run a Ansible play on all the managed nodes. So using this field, so Ansible will process multiple plays in the playbook. When it processes the first play, it will read the host and it will understand, okay, I need to execute this set of tasks on this particular host. If the host is all, then it executes on all the managed nodes. If the host is grouped to a particular group in the inventory file, it understands, okay, I only need to execute on set of managed nodes. Using which user do I need to execute? Using the remote user that is mentioned. So this input is taken by the Ansible in the control node. So Ansible connects to this managed nodes, whichever are required, and it installs the modules that you provide in the task, and then module is executed using Python that is installed on the managed nodes. So this is the workflow that we have learned. And if you go to the GitHub repository and look for the Day-03 folder, we have a sample playbook. So this is the sample playbook, and this just has one play, as I've mentioned in the theory part. So this one play says host as all, where this particular task, there are two tasks in this play, which has to be executed on all the hosts in the inventory file. Become true basically means that the remote user is root. And this is task 1, this is task 2. Ansible reads this task, looks into the module. So these are the modules in the task, and Ansible installs these modules on the target machine and executes them using Python. So this is the entire workflow that we have learned during day 3. Now let's move to the topic for today, that is roles. So to explain roles in Ansible, let me put you some questions. So in the previous example that we have seen, there are only 2 tasks in the Ansible playbook. Because we were writing our very first Ansible playbook, so we have chosen a very simple Ansible playbook that has only 2 tasks. But imagine a scenario where you have an Ansible playbook that has 50 number of tasks, or an Ansible playbook with 60 number of tasks. Not just the number of tasks, but imagine a scenario where within your Ansible playbook, you have hosts, then you have multiple number of variables. So let's say the case where you have 20 variables. And then you have tasks where within the task section, you might want to put some 40, 50 tasks. Then you have something called handlers. I'll explain what is handlers, don't worry. Then you have the meta information of the Ansible playbook. So what happens in this case is not just that the size of your Ansible playbook goes high, but this Ansible playbook that you are writing will also lose things like readability, right? Whoever is reading this Ansible playbook, imagine you open a playbook.yaml file, right? Main.yaml file, or your first playbook.yaml file, or whatever is the name of the playbook. You open a file and imagine you see 2000 lines. The moment you see this playbook.yaml file with 2000 lines, that is a red flag and you will lose interest in reading the file. But instead, imagine the case where you can split this playbook. Okay, you can clearly see here there are multiple sections. There is a section for variables. There is a section for tasks. There is a section for handlers. There is a section for metadata. What if you split these sections and each section you put in a different folder, and within the folder, you have individual YAML files. At the first sight, you might feel it complicated. You might think, Abhishek, I can write this entire playbook in one YAML file. Instead, why should I create a folder for vars? Then why should I create a folder for tasks? Why should I create a folder for handlers? Why should I create a folder for meta? Instead, I can write only one YAML file. But you know, when you see a YAML file which is as simple as this, everything looks good, great. But when you see the same YAML file with 2000 lines, immediately you will say that Ansible is complicated and I don't want to write the code in Ansible. So that brings to the concept called as readability and modularity. Not just for Ansible, for any programming language. It can be Python, it can be Go, it can be even languages like Terraform. Readability and modularity is very, very important. And to address that readability and modularity, Ansible brings a concept called as roles. Wherein simple language, without any complication, if you want to understand what is a role is nothing but take a Ansible playbook, and if you split the different sections in the Ansible playbook into different folders and place them under one umbrella called as role, then that becomes your Ansible role. So you don't have to learn anything additional in terms of Ansible role. All that you need to do is, if you know how to write a Ansible playbook.yaml file, you can just take the individual parts and put them under each and every folder. Now you might say, but Abhishek, do I need to create these folders each and every time? Is it not complicated? Don't worry. What Ansible does is, let me pull my terminal. So Ansible can create that entire folder structure for you by just running one command. And the command is Ansible Galaxy. So we are learning a new command at this point of time. Till now, we learned two Ansible commands. One is the Ansible command itself when you want to execute ad hoc commands. Next, we learned Ansible playbook command when you want to execute the Ansible playbooks. Now, I am explaining a new command which is called as Ansible Galaxy. And this command is going to play a very, very crucial role, because this command will simplify creating, managing, deleting, and listing of the Ansible roles. Now let me quickly show you how to create a role using Ansible Galaxy. It's very, very simple. All that you need to do is Ansible Galaxy followed by role followed by init, right? Ansible Galaxy role init, and provide the name of the role that you want to create. Let's say the name of the role that I want to create is test. So it said role test was created successfully. Let's see what did it do. If you are wondering what are these files, I'm not doing anything new. I'm just taking the files from the Day-03 folder. I'm using the same files, because I said in the introduction, I will convert whatever you have learned in Day-03 into the roles concept. Okay, I'll explain roles even further. Then we will see how to convert the the playbook into the roles, and we will also learn the execution part. For now, I have taken the same files. Okay, the first playbook folder, first playbook.yaml and index.html. We are using the same files, but we have created a role called as test. And like I have explained in the theory part, within this role, there will be these folders. Let's see if we have the folders or not. If we just do test, cd test, and if I do ls, or let me do ls-ltr, see we have the folders like vars, tasks, meta, handlers. Additionally, we have three folders. One is files, one is templates, and the other is defaults. Don't worry, I will also cover what are those things. But before that, it is very important to understand why are we using roles and when should we go for roles. If you are writing such simple Ansible playbooks, you don't even have to worry about roles. You can write them, you can use them. But when you are writing complicated Ansible playbooks, Abhishek, you keep telling complicated Ansible playbooks. What exactly are they? Can you give some examples? For sure. Let's take example of installing and configuring Kubernetes. Not every organization go for managed Kubernetes services such as EKS or AKS. In your organization, you might have a requirement to install Kubernetes on the control nodes and the worker nodes. Terraform can create the infrastructure. Terraform is used to create the infrastructure, right? It's a ISC tool where you might spin up the EC2 instances, VPC configuration. But when you want to install the packages on the EC2 instances or the Fargate instances, that is where Ansible comes into picture. And this can be a complicated role because to install Kubernetes, you have your control nodes, then you have your worker nodes. And on the control nodes, you need to install and configure different workloads, API server, etcd. Then you have to set up container runtime, container network, right? And again, on the worker nodes, you might want to set up the kubelet. You might want to set up how worker nodes are joining with the control nodes. So overall, this playbook, like I've explained, might easily go up to 50-60 tasks, right? So imagine you joined an organization and the seniors in the organization have given you a playbook.yaml file which has Kubernetes installation and configuration. You will see a file like this and immediately you will say it's very difficult to understand. Instead, the same example, Kubernetes, or another example, let's say installation and configuration of databases like Oracle. Again, there will be so many steps to install a version of Oracle, configure that version of Oracle or any database. So such things, by using roles, you can make your playbook more readable, more modular, and in future, using the Ansible Galaxy. Ansible provides something called as Ansible Galaxy. The one that we saw here is the command line utility for the same, right? So using this Ansible Galaxy, you can create roles and you can upload that roles into this Ansible Galaxy or to your GitHub, and you can share the roles within your organization. So the other advantage that roles brings here, along with the readability and modularity, this can be also shared across your organization because roles can be uploaded to, you can assume Ansible Galaxy as a marketplace, just like Docker has a Docker Hub, right? Amazon has a marketplace. Docker has, marketplace like Docker Hub or a registry. Similarly, Ansible Galaxy also has something like this, where you can just go to this roles and you can search for any role. Let's say your task is to set up Kubernetes. So just come here and search for the role. You have different users, a role to install Kubernetes on Linux. So you'll have hundreds of such examples. In your organization, also you can use this, or you can use GitHub also for sharing your roles so that you don't have to write the roles again and again. If you're doing freelancing work or if you are open to consuming the roles which are public, then your opportunities are endless. Imagine this is just like Docker Hub, a best example for you, right? So the other advantage that roles bring is readability, modularity, and also sharing across teams, organization, and across everyone outside your organization if you want. Don't worry, we have in next video, that is in day 5, we are going to explore Ansible Galaxy more. You can see the topic where I will show you how to push your roles to Ansible Galaxy, how to read the roles from the Ansible Galaxy on your local machine. Just like when we learned Docker, we learned how to push the Docker images, how to pull the Docker images, how to list the Docker images on your local machine. Similarly, we will do everything with Ansible roles. So right now, I hope it is easy to understand. When should you go for Ansible roles and why should you go for it? Very simple answer is readability, modularity, and sharing across different teams. We also have these notes. Let's say after the class, if you want to revise, go to the Day-04 folder and look for the roles.md file where I have explained why should someone go for Ansible roles by explaining the advantages. Now, Abhishek, what are the different folders in the Ansible role? Like you have explained that within an Ansible role, there is vars. Okay, I can understand what exactly is vars folder. I believe within this var folder, I can place some variables. Exactly right. If you go here and there is a folder called vars. If you go to that folder, you can see a file called main.yaml. You can change the name as well. You can add new variable, new multiple files also into the vars folder, but you can start placing your variables here. Any number of variables. If you have one variable, two variable, what kind of variables, anything, you can place them in the vars folder. Okay. Then you have explained there is task folder. Again, I can understand. I can simply copy the tasks that are here. Right? I can just copy the tasks that are here onto the, again, Vim tasks. There is a file called main.yaml. I can simply copy paste them here. Okay, great. So the task thing is also clear. Then you said meta. I can understand meta is about the metadata, which is quite simple, where again in the meta.yaml file, I can just write Abhishek is the author of this file. Abhishek is the owner of it. If you have any questions, approach Abhishek, or this is version 1 of the Ansible role, you can add such metadata information. Now, what about the other folders? There are folders like handlers, right? Then there is a folder called defaults. Then you have files and templates. Abhishek, what about these 4 folders? Let's learn about them. First, let's start with simple files. So files is nothing but, if you go back to the day 3 thing here, I'm writing this entire code and I have a file which I'm copying to the Apache default directory, right? var www.html, where I have placed that file index.html. I am placing that along with the playbook.yaml. Imagine the same case where you have multiple HTML files. Quite possible, right? When you want to build a very good static website, you might have multiple HTML files. You might have CSS files, right? Now, the problem is that when you have so many things in the same folder where your playbook.yaml is, person who is looking at this playbook might again feel confused. You might have some YAML files also. So what you can do is simply put them into the folder called files, right? So if you just go to this folder called files and add any number of files that you have here, and in the playbook, right, in this task that you are writing, instead of referencing directly, you can just say files hyphen index.html, right? This is the only change that you can do. That's it. Perfect. Now let me close this. Okay, Abhishek, what about the other things? Why you have templates? Templates and files are almost similar. The only difference is that when you have dynamic files, what if you have files where you want to keep some values in the file dynamic? Best example is provided in here. Here I have a file called test.j2. J2 because Ansible follows the Jinja templating standard, where this is the content of my file, where I'm saying my name is, if you are creating an EC2 instance and if you want to run this thing, my name is Ansible host name. That is, instead of writing your EC2 instance host name directly, because it will keep changing, what you can simply do is you can create a file called test.j2, or you can pass any kind of variables into the template files, which makes the template files dynamic. You can put the files directly in the static approach into the files folder, but when you want dynamic files where the entries of the file can be modified in the Ansible playbook, then you should be going for templates, right? Then next we have is defaults. Defaults are also variables, but the difference between vars and defaults is that defaults, as the name suggests, are the default values. That means if you are not providing any value to the variables that you have created, then you can say by default take the value that is available in the default/main.yaml. Then comes the final thing, that is handlers. Now what about the case of handlers? So handlers is basically Ansible tasks which you want to execute upon a particular action. For example, you can see here in this Ansible playbook, we have defined two handlers, right? One is restart memcached and restart Apache. Ignore this one. Let's say I want to write a handler called restart Apache. So what I can do is execute this task. Handler is also like a task where execute this particular thing only when a particular task is requesting for. So in the task here, we are basically placing a file, like we are deploying a file, and whenever a file is deployed or whenever a application is deployed, you always want to restart your web server or the application server, right? Such things can be placed in handlers because you might want to call these handlers multiple times in your Ansible playbook, or you might want to call these handlers occasionally only when it is required. Such things you can place as handlers. Handlers are tasks, but only executed upon a particular action, and someone notifies that the handlers have to be executed. So here what we are doing, we are writing a task where we are copying a file onto a particular location where Apache is reading that file. And then in the task, we are notifying, we are saying that the handler called restart Apache has to be executed, right? This is the significance of handlers. Again, I'm saying you don't have to worry if you are not completely understanding these things, because this is your first day with Ansible roles. So going ahead, we will be doing examples with Ansible roles. We have 10 more days to go, where we will be using each and every folder that is mentioned here, and we will use with examples. So now, Abhishek, can we convert the playbook that we have written in the last class? So this was the playbook, right? Now let's convert this into the Ansible roles and try to execute it as role. Very simple. All that you need to do is, let's say someone is giving you a Ansible playbook like this. Okay, they have given you Ansible playbook like this. Let's remove this rm-rf test. So this is given to you by your colleague, and they have asked you to convert this Ansible playbook into role. So what you will simply do is, first you will use the Ansible Galaxy command. Role in it, let's call this role as, let's say, HTTPD. Okay. So this is created. We can see if you just do ls-ltr httpd, all the folders are created. Now let's go to the Ansible playbook.yaml or the first playbook.yaml. And what I'm going to do, I will simply copy these things here, right? Because I just have tasks here. I don't have vars, I don't have handlers, I don't have any other things. I just have tasks. So let me copy this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this. Okay, just save this file for now. I'm going to go to the httpd role tasks main.yaml and I'm going to place them here. Okay, whenever you have such extra spaces and you want to indent it, you can just use Ctrl+V, escape Ctrl+V, and you can remove all of them by clicking on D for delete. Okay, now let me save this file. Okay, Abhishek, here what you have done is you removed the tasks from the first playbook.yaml, and as you have explained in the theory part, you put them in the HTTP folder inside the task. But how will this first playbook.yaml understand the tasks are present there? Or how will the first playbook.yaml understand what is the role that I have to use? Simply just go to the first playbook.yaml and just say roles, because a playbook can use or a play can use multiple roles. Here just write httpd. And Abhishek, I also have a file called index.html. Okay, no worries. Just copy the index.html and put that in httpd. Okay, and within the httpd files, or we can directly move them, right? You don't even have to copy because I want to move it completely. Within the files, I can just put it. Now if I again do ls, I just have first playbook.yaml. I have my inventory file and I have a role called httpd, and within the role, I'm not sure if I have dir command. Okay, that's okay. So within the role called httpd, I have a files folder where within the files folder, I have placed my index.html. Then I have task folder where in the task main.yaml, I have written the complete task. Now I have to for sure go to the src of it, and I have to update the location of my index.html. So roles does not do any magic for you. It will only structure, modularize, and help in sharing your Ansible code. Everything you have to do it by your own. So within the src folder, I'll just say files/index.html because it's available in the files folder. Perfect. So now let's see if we can run it and if this Ansible role will execute successfully or not. So for that, I'm going to do Ansible playbook -i inventory.ini first playbook.yaml. Every time you run Ansible play, the first thing that runs is gathering facts, because it has to gather the facts. It has to see if the target machine is reachable, if the passwordless authentication is fine, if it can install the module on it and execute the module. All that things takes place in the gather fact. Then install Apache, worked fine. Then copy files from owner and permissions, executed. But you can see the change tasks are 0. Okay, all the three tasks are executed, but changed are zero. Why? Because Ansible is idempotent in nature. I've explained this in first class, where if something is already available, the thing that you are trying to do, if it is already available on the target machine or the managed nodes, Ansible will not execute that again. If you're taking shell script or Python for an example, what happens with shell script? If you are telling shell script to create a directory, even though the directory is present, okay, for example, if I do mkdir abc, okay, now abc folder is available. If I again do mkdir abc, shell script will fail or the shell command will fail. This nature is not called as idempotent. Whereas if you do the same thing with Ansible, create a folder once and create the folder again, Ansible will not create the folder because it says the folder is already available. I don't have to create it. This nature is called as idempotent, which is very important characteristic of Ansible. That's why here you can see that the number of tasks are executed 3, but nothing is changed on the target machine. So now let's connect to one of the EC2 instance and let's delete that HTML file. Let's see if Ansible is going to create it or not. That way we can confirm our roles are working, right? Previously the configuration was already there, so it did not create anything. So let's take manage node 1 and connect. Let's use the EC2 instance connect. I'll take the sudo user and I'll try to delete it, the var ww html. So let's just do sudo su hyphen. I'm with the root user. Let's do var. Let's do www. Let's do html. And here we have the index.html. Now let's remove this. Okay. And let's rerun this command. Now using roles, let's see if the same thing is working or not. I have to see one task in the change status. Okay, it is running. You can clearly see it took some time in the execution of this particular thing. And it said changed as 1. Let's see, I have deleted it. And if I do it and I have the index.html file. So this is how the Ansible roles are going to work, where you will just take the playbook and you will restructure, modularize it so that you can reuse that playbook. That is called as Ansible role. Going ahead in the next classes, you are going to understand more advantages of roles, how roles can change the game of Ansible, how you can share it across the organizations, how you can reuse that piece of code, how you can make complicated Ansible playbooks as simple as possible. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you found it useful. Stay tuned for the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.